the Quatermass movies, which I am super excited about, and telling him that he just needs to get to the pit. Like, they're all good, but just make it to the pit, man.
I'm curious to see when the Doctor changes to a different actor, because this first guy,
pit.
the first two, he's interesting, but it's very 1950s, in terms of acting style and stuff. So I am curious to see once it leaps into like the 60s, right? Because the Pit is like a Roy Ward Baker film, so it's a totally different.
So by the time it
era.
leaps into Quatermass in the Pit, Bernard Quatermass becomes an American, because they thought that that would attract more American audiences. And I don't think that they preserved that in the 1970s serials. I feel like that was just, of the time. But I have a whole bunch of stuff set up for my trip and watching on the plane tomorrow. So I'm watching The Haunted Sea, which you gave me, Elric. I don't even know when that's from.
Oh, it's a 90s film. I expect it to be probably not good. But when I stumbled upon it and realized it was like, aqua horror, you probably hadn't seen it. It had somebody like it's not Carrie Rory, who you were just talking about, but it's somebody like that who was like really sexy in the late 90s is on board. So I imagine there'll be a sleazy sex scene, a aqua monster, and a lot of brooding bearded dudes. That's
perfect to watch on a flight. Let's do it. And then I've also got Hercules Returns from '93, which you sent me today.
Like, and pure gem. That's for when you're feeling down.
Never seen it.
I also have to get you the Goblin thing, because we both have to watch that for the next.
Well, I also have Gakadama, the Demon, which is a Japanese, or it might be Hong Kong. This might be a Cat 5 film. I am not, or Cat 3. I am not sure. You're gonna have to Google Gakadama, the Demon. And then I've got Norway, which is a vampire film from 2014 that played at Beyond Fest, but never got a release here in the US. When I saw it, it was shown under Vlad the Vampire. Yeah. Which is a shitty name. And then I've also got Malefique from 2002, which I've never seen. So I got all types of plane viewing to do.
All right, I should just let everyone know that we just decided to start the webinar in the middle of a conversation. It's not like you missed anything about the movie.
But they won't be able to jump in now. That was essential background information, in my opinion, to a conversation with the two of us. That's what.
Hello, and welcome to the USC and Colors of the Dark screening of Psychomania. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, Alex, for having us back again.
My pleasure. And this is now going to be an alternating Zoom webinar / live in person series, which I'm very excited about.
I am so excited to get back to doing some in-person screenings. And have we announced what we're doing in October yet?
We are going to be presenting the 4K restoration of Possession, which is, I believe, not just Elric's favorite movie, but the film that the two of you became best friends on.
Yep.
As far as I can tell from just listening to your podcasts.
Leaving. He had to run to the restroom or something. Oh, wait, no, he's getting something geeky down.
I'll show you the Possession toys.
Oh,
where did you get those?
I'm the only one on Earth who has these two.
Wow, that is cool. That's very cool.
It's pretty goofy, but that guy Readful Things made the first one and then made the second one for me. So
does he actually make those toys? I follow him on Instagram.
He's really talented. I mean, they're really fun. Wow. Because he does such quirky things.
Yeah, they're all really fun. So next month we're showing Psychomania. So for those of you who
tonight we're screening Psychomania.
Sorry. Next month we're screening Possession. Tonight we're screening Psychomania. For those of you who are the first time joining us, Elric and I host a show for Fangoria called Colors of the Dark. And our show covers all types of horror. We cover what is popular that week, what's coming up, but we specialize in horror history. Specifically kind of niche stuff that's overlooked, underseen, or what we call on the show the deep cuts.
Call us cult hype.
Hype.
We like to hype cult films, basically. I mean, you definitely have an academic approach. Sometimes I just think of myself as some weird hype machine, but whatever. If we find something that no one can find, we rave about it until suddenly somebody puts it on Blu-ray, and so that's a win for everyone as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and actually, Alex just said that we kind of first bonded as best friends over Possession. It was at a screening of Possession at the Silent Movie Theater back when that was still open years ago. And that's definitely Elric and mine's jam, is finding weird movies and really just celebrating them and bringing them to light.
And this one was, so this is one that I only saw a couple months ago for our deep cuts. Oh, maybe it's a little longer than that because it was right when we kind of started the deep cuts. But it was the initial impetus for us doing the deep cuts was you probably you might have even forgotten it. The very first couple episodes. The idea was I would force you to watch something you hadn't seen, and you would force me to watch something I hadn't, which is still a cool idea. But I don't think we'd have much. We wouldn't have many titles. It would be hard to do. But this was a big one.
For the first episode, you had me watch Erebado.
I think so, yeah. One of my favorite. We're about to finally get a Blu-ray.
It's finally getting a beautiful Blu-ray release.
And a cinema release, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And then I had you watch PSYCHOMANIA because this is one that I'd been like raving about for a really long time. So much that I own the shirt.
Yeah, nice. But yes, and this was one that, and the very things that probably sell it for some people are probably why it kept me away. Sometimes that will be the case. Like if I see a movie that looks like, oh, it's a biker film, that might be, if I'm not in the mood for it, I'm kind of like, okay, I already know what that is in my brain. I feel like I know. If I'd known somehow that it's also a black magic folk horror, like, just this wild mishmash of, it feels like a genre freak out for people who didn't know what they wanted to make next because they didn't know what was about to trend. And so it's like, oh, Hammer's dying, but quickly, biker films, and let's mix them. And I love that about it. Because
I wrote it down, mod, biker, hippie exploitation, psychedelic folk horror.
Yeah.
Is where this roots itself. And yeah, it really is. It feels, well, it was made by a company. The actual producers did not make a lot of horror. They mostly made spaghetti westerns. And so this was kind of a weird one-off for them. And the director, Don Sharp, also didn't make a lot. He did some horror. He did some Hammer stuff. He did
Curse of the Fly.
Curse of the Fly, Rasputin the Mad Monk. I think he did Kiss of the Vampire. So he did a couple of Hammers, but like what he was known for was the Fu Manchu films.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very much a kind of a product of its time where it is this weird amalgam of all of these different exploitation genres mixed together. It's 1973. Post 1969, right as soon as we get the Easy Rider, all of this huge amount of biker exploitation comes out. And most of it is not as kind of subdued of this. Most of it is about bikers going crazy and kidnapping people and running drugs and doing satanic stuff. Okay, the bikers in this do satanic stuff, but they're not.
Satan sadists or something.
Yeah, it's all Satan sadists. It's all very just kind of over the top outlaw type stuff. And so most of that are direct products of Easy Rider. This is a bit different because it feels less about the outlaw, and they kind of channel their energy more into the witchcraft and the folk horror.
Yeah, and there's a couple of folk horror films that between Wicker Man and Robin Redbreast, which will get into the public consciousness a lot more in America in the coming months because it's part of the big box set coming from Severin. Up until then, it was almost unknown, I would say, here, but probably quite a well-known cult movie in the UK. It's black and white because the BBC lost the actual color transfer from back in the day. They recorded over, which is its own weird story. But if you take those two movies, this film kind of falls between the two in terms of style, I think. And I could also see Sergeant Howie from Wicker Man walking down the street of this film and bikers biking past him before he went to Summer Isle. I can see him, being the detective on duty in the small town of Robin Redbreast. So I think there's something about that British, just the feeling of the world, the film stock, all those things that create this feeling of what we think of as British folk horror, not the white gowns and people in fields version, but the one that connects a little bit more to urban freak out, like that people want still something of nature, even though the world is so much more urban by this point.
Yeah, and there was definitely a chunk of those that we saw around this time where it is, we have our Blood on Satan's Claws and our, for those of you who are new to folk horror, when we say folk horror, it's where Midsommar came from. Like Midsommar is kind of the conglomeration of decades worth of these movies, all about kind of paganistic practices in Europe. And some of them root themselves over here, but yeah, it's very much kind of like a UK product. And that's kind of where this is coming in. And these folk horrors had been happening in Britain, like way back into literature, you're seeing it. And they were part of British cinema from the very start, and television, like it was a huge part of the television programming as well.
But I think I would have been a lot quicker you could have gotten me to watch this movie much quicker. I think it took me 6 years or something from the time you talked about this. If you had just said George Sanders, if you see, that's where I come to cinema. It's not the bikers, it's aging George Sanders cynical as all hell, final film role. He actually
but
died
that's a
before.
sad story.
Well, no, it's the greatest. It's actually one of the things that got me into Hollywood movies. Reading Kenneth Anger's.
I don't mean to laugh about it.
No,
it's
such so
just
dry.
A dry, yeah.
I'll read before we start just to set the upbeat tone. I'm going to read his final line. So George Sanders, who was, in a lot of great Hitchcock films, had a lot of great serials. He was in Val Lewton. I mean, he's just one of those really special presences. Voyage. What is the Divorce Italy movie by Rossellini? My Voyage to Italy? No, My Voyage.
Oh, yeah, Voyage to Italy. Where
Voyage to Italy,
with Ingrid Bergman.
Ingrid Bergman, I think one of the greatest movies ever. Like, it's just one of the best films I've ever seen about the end of a marriage. He was just naturally progressive. Yeah, exactly. Where they see the Pompeii Love, and he was married to Zsa Zsa Gabor for a long time, which would drive anyone crazy. But I remember reading the Kenneth Anger books, Hollywood Babylon, and one of the first things that just like totally grabbed me was this idea of this guy whose suicide note when he died before this movie came out. Dear world, I'm leaving because I'm bored. I feel I've lived long enough. I am leaving you with your worries in the sweet cesspool. Good luck. And it's like, that's how you leave the earth.
That was his suicide note that he left, right? He had actually just seen a work print of this, or like an early film screening of the film. But yeah, this was his last role before he died of boredom.
But he's great, and that adds to this. This is a really great role for him. Actually, it's really mysterious and dark, and it's actually, to me, the most interesting thing about the movie in some ways. So even if the biker stuff isn't your jam, then you'll find this other track running through this movie, which I think is super cool. So, but we should probably get into it.
Yeah, I will say I'm really fascinated by the hippie exploitation side of this, because even though this is a weird film where it is kind of and remember that hippies for the most part were kind of an Americanized thing that came out of Vietnam and the civil rights movement and everything that was happening during that time period, but we still see hippies come into a lot of kind of Euro trash films. We see them in giallos, but it's kind of in a different sense. And in this, they're mod hippies, which is kind of a weird thing to think about, where it's this very kind of modish quality to them. But that said, like the funeral scene that they do, it feels very hippie. And if you think about it, hippie and folk horror really blend together well. And so it's kind of an interesting interpretation, and it all just comes to fruition during a funeral scene.
Yeah, a great scene.
And hey, Brett, how are you doing?
Hi, sorry I'm late. I got so mixed up between 7 and 7:30 tonight. I had a brain fart. So here we are.
That's okay.
The least subtle of entrances on Zooms, right? You can never do a it's impossible.
You can't just slide in the back.
Yeah, you just gotta appear.
Totally. This movie makes me want to be both a biker and a ghost.
Yeah.
Right? Simultaneously. It totally works. So yeah, and I will say that if I ever was to get a motorcycle helmet, I want the emblem on it. Like, it's just so iconic and just such one of the more brilliant marketing campaigns to have that kind of as the central image. But yeah, shall we dive into Psychomania?
Let's do it. I should just say this is offered courtesy of Arrow Films and is part of our partnership with the American Genre Film Archive. So thank you, Brett, for popping in and making it all happen with Arrow. And we'll be back to talk about the movie. And as I think I don't want to activate the chat now because I've discovered it is very distracting when the movie's running. However, I will put the chat on when we come back. So you can ask questions in the Q&A box. I mean, Elric, if you find that it just goes way out of control, we can turn it back off. But it was fun the other night, I think, when we tried that out the last time, Brett. But we'll sort of play it by ear. But I think that we can put you can put your questions into the Q&A box as we've been doing in the past. And then we can turn on the chat for some live commentary once we're back. So enjoy the movie, and we'll see you guys in 85 minutes. All right, let's get everyone back on board. I like that the final credit to Penny Leatherbarrow is quite the name.
I liked Mrs. Pettibone. There we go.
So
Elric, are you still with us?
Bathroom break. What do you guys miss the ending of the movie? Do you go to the bathroom at the end of the movie? Or you wait for the credits to roll. Come on. Not missing the people turning to stone and
I know.
the high-tech finale.
It was a cool effect. It was kind of cool. I like they were like combination of stone and spider webby simultaneously.
I think they should have turned into, how there was, how many stones are there in that cemetery? Like 6 or 7 of those key stones. I thought each one should have turned into the stone next to the actual space or something.
And thus cool. You have explained Stonehenge all in one.
But that's not the real stone. What is that? I wonder if that is a real location or if that was just created for the film.
But is that the real mythology behind Stonehenge? I mean, in the sense that like, is that one of the things? I mean, not that this is supposed to represent Stonehenge, but like that's what Stonehenge is.
I don't think so. But I will say like Stonehenge and by no means is Stonehenge the only henge in the UK. Those henges play like a really strong role in a lot of folk horror, even some of the folk horror that comes over. I mean, like Halloween 3 is all about some Stonehenge action. But we see it in like Curse of the Demon involves henges. There's a lot that do.
Fucking aliens, dude.
Fucking aliens.
Fucking aliens.
I like your assertion, Alex, that all henges are just assholes who got their comeuppance.
That's right. All it is. That's you came back from the dead and now you're a big rock. So.
Not that they need to be necessarily like a biker gang that came back from the dead, but that the rocks themselves are sort of like the remains of humans, of the druids or whatever, some sort of incarnation of a human being.
I am the wrong person to ask about that theory, but it's fascinating.
I don't think so, but I think they are meant to be built in those areas that people deem thin places. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of it. So I think it's more of it's more just symbolism that they use, in their mythology. I don't know.
Connection to the folklore.
Yeah, but what's this? Another movie that's about to get a bit of love in the folk horror world, Allison's Birthday, also uses a little bit of this, and that's coming from a Greek mythology.
And that's an Australian film.
But like what I guess Americans might not know as much is that a huge portion of Australians are Greek immigrants. And like, so if you go to Melbourne, a city like Melbourne as a city in Australia has more Greek people. The only place that has more Greek people is Athens in the world. Even other places in Greece don't have as many Greek people as Melbourne. So it's this huge immigrant population. And that movie is really cool because you don't really see it coming. It just feels like a kind of a teen Australian movie with some like kind of Ouija board action, and then suddenly it takes this kind of wild turn into this other kind of mythology. So that movie is going to be a little easier to see very soon with this Severin release of it finally out here, because it's a really cool movie.
What's
really
it called?
Neat. It's called Allison's Birthday. Yeah,
and it's never been released here in the States beyond VHS.
Even in Australia, it had a pretty. I mean, it was kind of stuck on VHS for the last. It might have had a DVD, but my memory was that it was really hard to see.
Wow.
Well, if they sell out of that box set, it'll still be hard to see.
That's true. That's true.
No doubt. So I love this movie because it blends a lot of stuff into the folk horror. Like this is coming off of what they typically term as like the Unholy Three, where we've got Wicker Man, Blood on Satan's Claw, and Witchfinder General, which are kind of like your big three leaders of folk horror, like right around the tail end of the 1960s into the early 1970s. And this is coming right off that, like 1973, but it went in a vastly different direction, kind of just using notes of classic British folk horror, but bringing in this motorcycle element. I love, somebody wrote up on Twitter, but it's true. I love a good song that starts the second act by summarizing everything that happened in the first, especially at a funeral. So yeah, y'all are going to bury me sitting upright, possibly at my desk typing on my computer, because that's where I'm usually found. But I think that needs to. But wait, Elric said no. I got to be fed to sharks.
I'm feeding you to sharks. I'm feeding you.
It really is the way I have to go.
But I'll put you on a motorbike when I throw you down. So
I'm just going to prop you up in the back row of a cinema somewhere.
That's probably about right. But it would be the front row in my case. I love that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You do always sit up front.
I think you mentioned a little bit, you're talking about hippie stuff before, and I thought that was interesting because there's an unholy, uncomfortable relationship between hippiedom and bikerdom that even an Easy Rider there's these scenes where like Fonda and Hopper think that they're hippies.
Yes.
But they're not. They're just not. When they're around real hippies, they stand out like a sore thumb. When they go to the commune, they feel like modernists. They feel like charlatans almost, because they're also running drugs in that movie. And I feel like that's continued through almost all the biker movies you see. It's like there's this flirtation with hippiedom, but hippiedom is more in line with like kind of folk focus, like almost like what folk horror would be.
It's very much
and the
more
others are more
pagan.
urban. Yeah. And so I think this movie, I hadn't seen that, and I've only seen this movie for the second time tonight. So this is the first time seeing it going, oh, it actually is fairly similar to what was happening. And I think I don't know, we weren't around when these were being made, but I think that is that thing about everything is so increasingly urban and modern that there's this desperation to hold on to something from the past. And I think these make the more interesting folk horrors, I find, like these ones that have a modern edge. Kill List is obviously a big mashup of all these things, but is a similar kind of thing, versus the ones where everyone's wearing white and praying. Like I find that a lot less accessible personally.
So with the motorcycle exploitation or the cycle exploitation, 90% of the time, the way that those kind of rooted themselves in the 1970s, at least here in the States, it was bikers versus hippies. It was very much like hippiedom is dying out, and so it would kind of border on hippie exploitation. Weird crossover ones that you see kind of at the beginning of it, where Easy Rider does that, where it's very much like the bike represents freedom, and it's the same freedom that we're trying to gain through hippiedom. And you see it a little bit through a lot of the drug exploitation films as well, like The Trip brings in motorcycles. Acid Eaters is one of my faves, and that one actually begins with this like long motorcycle ride where they're driving out to the middle of nowhere, and then they take acid, and then they're like riding their motorcycles on acid, and so it's this weird amalgam of the two. But then as we move further into the 70s, it really does become like, no, we are the rough and tumble people in leather, loving chains and motors, and y'all are going to go like worship trees in the woods and sing. And so it really bifurcates pretty quickly. But yeah, this 1973, it's still melding the two. And somehow we also get that mod element in there where, the house is hyper stylized. There's a lot of fashion happening as well once we get into the mom and everything. So it's pretty fascinating, everything that this is bringing together.
And there's no doubt after watching it this time, right? I think we're all on the same level that we see that George Lucas was watching this. Empire Strikes Back. Come on, when he goes into the room, that's just Dagobah, right? That's just Luke going into Dagobah, being forced to face his dark Darth Vader. That's all I kept thinking watching it this time. It's like, oh, it's that kind of scene. So we can dream that George Lucas. I like the idea that George Lucas watched this movie somehow. I don't know which characters Jajo thinks. I have to think this through. Probably not George
the
Sanders.
Danny Bottagucci looking one.
Maybe
it was definitely the Toad definitely.
See?
I love the inclusion of the toads in this. I can't think of another frog folk horror, but this one really does kind of fold that in well.
What also goes with LSD and tripping, right? Like the idea of like a bad trip or kissing a frog or licking a frog, all those old ideas that that you could trip from that as well. I think
you technically can cane toads.
You can
technically can. I wouldn't recommend like licking them, but but it does definitely. The frog has always been in some way connected to kind of like the trip and the drug exploitation culture in that regard.
And should we talk about George Sanders? How classy was he?
So George Sanders was crazy classy in this.
Yeah, it's like, what's his name? What's the butler's name? They keep saying it throughout, and I've already forgotten the damn name.
They do, and I just removed my cast list while we were watching this.
Something like Chandler or something like that.
Yeah,
it's not quite Chandler Bing, but you're on the right track. It's longer. It was a longer word than Chandler, but it's like that. But anyway, I mean, he again, these kind of actors, when they are in these exploitation films, they absolutely give it the edge. Like, to me, that's
Chadwick.
Chadwick. That's it.
Shadwell.
Him and the mom, Beryl. I can't remember her name, but another actress who's been in hundreds and hundreds of big movies. But they just add such a different dimension than these young bikers, because every time you cut to it, you believe that party, you believe that world, which I think he's great. But what a weird last movie. I mean, the fact that it's obsessed with suicide, it's obsessed with the other realms. It's really unusual.
That is where it gets eerie, is kind of when you look at the tonality of the film and the whole idea of coming back, and that after this his suicide note literally just said, "I'm bored," was just shocking, and still puts this really dark bend on the movie.
Was this something that Americans knew of this movie, or did this come about in the DVD era?
I'd say this definitely came about in the DVD era.
I think from what wouldn't have known, but reading the liner notes of the Blu-ray, it seems like this was something that really caught its cult just being on TV. And I think it was a nothing when it came out. No one really noticed it, and then late night TV when it would do the like once a week horror section, it played, and I think people started keeping. I think it's called Appointment with Horror.
Is that on BBC?
Yeah, it's one of those channels that would do something called Appointment, and I think from then it became cult there. But I'm sure. I would guess that most people before David Gregory put that first disc out here probably had never seen that image. A lot of people here, I would say.
Yeah, I feel like if it had been on VHS in the 90s, I would have found it. Just because I burned through everything that the video store had between me or Elric, and we worked at video stores.
Well, especially that cover. That cover is pretty. I mean, it's pretty striking. You'd remember it.
It's definitely iconic. But I didn't know about it till David Gregory put that beautiful DVD, the original one, out, and then suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, how have I never seen this before?
Another one I would recommend people that with the seance stuff, which is nice. That again, another film that was almost impossible to see in America until maybe this year is Seance on a Wet Afternoon, which is just a beautifully made movie by Brian Forbes, and it's just really, I think it's one of the best films of its type. It's part supernatural, part charlatan kidnapping movie gone wrong kind of, but it's very, very dark and black and white, with great performances. But it reminds me of the start of this movie when they're doing the seance, and has a similar vibe, I think.
That's a tough one to find for under 50 bucks.
But I think it's just starting to get seen a bit more. So I don't know what's changed. I don't know if there's a new disc or what, but I have just been seeing it pop up a lot more than it used to. It used to be impossible. I think I had it recorded off TCM, and that's the only way I saw it for years. So
yeah, I've had it on my Amazon. My Amazon trick is I have like watches on discs that I really, really want to see. And so if they fall below a certain price range, I get an alert. And that's one that I've had on there forever, and it never falls below like 50 bucks. And I can't rationalize that. But yeah, it's one that I've always wanted to see because I've heard it's so good.
There's, and like the British occult stuff and British folk horror, there's obviously something that they do. I think it's like the grounding of it in complete, no one's making fun of it. It's not winky. It's very, it just feels like they accept it as part of the cultural staple, which I find refreshing, because it's not be played for camp at all. It's part of adult world, not just teen world.
I have to say there was a real sincerity to George Sanders looking at the Toad version of the mother at the very end. And I'm like, I don't know if that moment in a theater would play with the sincerity that it was meant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
but there were,
it was taking itself seriously in that moment.
Yeah.
But it could be construed as a funny, I mean, like with the right audience, I think that might have gotten some howls.
I think that the burial upright would have definitely gotten howls, even back in the day. I mean, he's so dead serious, and she's like looking at him, and it's literally like reverse shot as she's looking at him, and he's just staring straight forward. It's bizarre and awkward, and I don't see how it couldn't get some good laughs at that time period. It's still just the scene that I can't take seriously. And then when he rides out of the grave, holy shit, that is such a badass cool scene.
That is a great moment.
So yeah. But I mean, this is something, I know Elric's a big fan of these as well, but just within the past 2 years, we've discovered kind of the M.R. James stories that they would do as these little like 1 hour or half hour specials on the BBC. And Elric and I got into, and we started watching the Christmas ones. And then from there we've continued, and I'm going to forget the name of it again, but there was the one where the woman dug up like a stone in her backyard.
Yes,
and
Stigma. That one's Stigma, I think.
And that was honestly one of the most horrifying ones that I've seen. And it is very much in that same vein of like the modern day folk horror, because she moves into a house. There is, it's a modern house. There is no suspicion there might be anything weird. She digs up this weird kind of carved stone in her backyard. and all of a sudden she's bleeding out of her skin and it's all over and she can't stop it. And it's horrifying. It's really intense.
Yeah, a lot of the other ones I don't think have the flavor of this, but that one completely does. You're right. That one's completely more like modern folk horror. The others are much more like, ghost stories. I would say if you look up Nigel Neal, so when we first started this recording, me and Becca were off topic talking about Quatermass films that Nigel Neal wrote, but Nigel Neal later after those, more in the late 60s, early 70s, he wrote this, I don't know how many episodes, 4 or 5, called Beasts, and it's on YouTube. And I've only seen a couple but they were the kind of folk horror ones I watched, and they are really unsettling. And they, again, feel just like this world, same kind of time period as this film. One is like a young couple who move into a house and they find this thing buried inside the chimney. And it's like it's almost like it's not a fetus, but it's something like that. That's all kind of like a petrified body of some kind. And then weird stuff starts happening. And there's this flavor of these movies that, when was the last time you thought of that when you thought of British TV or film? It's been 30 years. I mean, there's a few directors out there obviously making interesting work, but as a movement, it's not like I think of modern British films in this way. And there used to be so much of it, so many interesting things like this being made. And probably those Christmas at Horror Story for Christmas, being a yearly staple, got a lot of people used to that side of the supernatural in their everyday life, which is super cool. I wish I'd grown up with those. I didn't. They might have played in New Zealand, but I only saw them recently, and I think that would have been a cool thing to look forward to each year.
I didn't even know about them until I was talking with the producer and director of Hosts last year, and said, like, tell me something I've never seen before. Like, give me a UK deep cut. And they were like, have you seen all the M.R. James Christmas movies? And immediately that night I ordered The Signalman and was completely blown away. That one was just really cool.
Except that one's not, weirdly enough, that's the weird thing, is that one is the guy who did Christmas Carol. The writer of the original Christmas Carol.
That is oh shit, you just asked me too quick.
Christmas Carol is one
somebody in chat is going to tell us, and
yes.
Dickens, thank you.
So that but it feels just like the others, but that's the only one that isn't. And then somebody in the chat, Gabriel, also pointed out, yes, one of our favorite movies is Night of the Demon or Curse of the Demon, which is also a James story, which is it's the best. That of all of these, just one of the best movies ever made, in my opinion. Curse of the Demon, I love that film. Somewhere between noir and like dark black magic fantasy or something. It's such an unusual movie.
Beautiful folk horror mixed into it. It's the pagan side. But we were getting a little bit of folk horror here in the States in the late 1960s, early 70s. Like, we were getting a tiny bit of it, but nothing like we were seeing overseas. But it was definitely becoming a little bit more, especially with the hippie movement. And Kayla actually talks about this in the wonderful doc, Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched, about how, because we were doing the Back to the Earth, Back to the Land movement here in the late 60s, early 70s, the idea of people who previously were urban dwellers moving into these kind of more rural environments and trying to terraform the land, like, it came up. And that we also see this birth of eco horror right around the same time period as well. Thank you, Elric.
Yeah, no, I'm just writing in case anyone's following this. But yeah, no, look, Kayla's documentary, like, me and Beck have seen a lot of movies. There, on that movie, I'm watching it, and there's clips I recognize, obvious movies, and then there's these deep cuts that I have felt like as the only human who'd ever seen them. And then there's another whole layer, another like 10 or 15 movies I've not only never heard of, but don't believe truly exist because they look like some sort of dark magic. Like, and when you watch a movie like that, you can't help but leave, like, it's 3 hours long. You can't help but leave a little jazzed and excited that you're never going to get to the end of all this great viewing and weird.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And it just kept going. Like, and now we're going to talk about voodoo movies.
Yeah. And it could have kept going. It probably could have had like 3 more hours and just done different parts of the world if she wanted to keep going.
And some of the ones, like the one that I took away from it, which I'm still just like proselytizing every chance I get, was called Transformations. And it was 1971, and it was made by a female film collective in Vermont who made this kind of like fictionalized faux documentary about witchcraft. And it's beautiful. And, finding other female directors from that time period is always a joy across the board. It's on Vimeo. You can find it. 1971 Transformations.
I know it's popping up at festivals, but are they going to do any kind of proper theatrical before putting it out on home video?
I've never heard.
Yeah, I know that it's playing Beyond Fest here in LA, and it's got a couple other festivals planned.
I mean, the box comes out in what, like December?
December is when they're doing the big box set, and
so
that's
maybe
got,
not.
yeah.
I mean, AGFA is putting it into theaters in between Beyond Fest and
Oh,
this
fantastic.
coming out. But it's not like a wide release. It's
Mm-hmm.
just venues that are choosing to do a one-off screening. I believe we'll be booking the film far into the future, because I think not only is it really entertaining, it's just like one of the great film essays in recent years.
Yeah.
I would put it on the same level as Los Angeles Plays Itself.
Yeah, because it's also like, that's one thing I made sure to mention to her when we had her on the show. It's like there's also a filmmaker voice behind this, and a lot of documentaries like this do feel like long extra features. This one, there's a choice being made in the fonts, in the animation sequences that go between them, and just the structure that goes beyond just like one of these traditional docs. So
it had an aesthetic
cool.
to
Yeah,
it.
which is super cool. So like her books, so
Definitely.
good plug.
Yeah. So we are actually planning to do a couple more folk horrors coming up throughout. We're going to do Possession, which is not exactly a folk horror. We're still arguing if it's a body horror. But we'll get into that.
Body horror scene, yeah.
Yeah, we did screen drafts this last week. We did.
We can't talk about that.
Oh, we can't talk about it. But there was a lot of discussion about whether Possession's a body horror, so we can't talk about it yet. But we're planning.
Of course it is. It's all kinds of horrors. It's like 8 different.
It's okay. That's the thing. It's
that was our kind of. We were like, we couldn't necessarily subscribe it to body horror because one scene. But yeah, we'll debate that later. But that said, yeah, we've got a couple more folk horror coming up as well that we are super excited to dive into.
Unless we get bored of that by then. I don't know.
It's honestly
asking us to make plans is pretty tough. Like every time we make a plan, it's always like, yeah, we're gonna find 5 more. We're gonna do techno horror by January, I'm pretty sure. So
well, I did finally get you to watch Tokyo Gore Police. That was kind of a feat in itself.
I can't reveal that at all. That's for another show too. But you did.
So I did.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I'm actually quite curious what people thought of this. Like, I don't know if we can open it to people or.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone wants to jump in and join our conversation, just raise your hand or ask us a question in the Q&A, and I'll bring you over as a panelist. I can just ask that you have your camera and mic ready to turn on. I don't know, maybe the fact that we opened the chat has sort of taken away some of the need to communicate directly. Anyone? Any takers tonight?
Besides folk horror, because I feel like in this screening series we'll be talking about it a lot, and especially in the coming months. What else have people seen in the last week or two that just kind of rocked them or didn't?
You know, I have to say, what has been my jam for the last couple of weeks is the TV show Evil. Which I think I'm the only person watching. I keep trying to find somebody that I can talk about Evil with. So hopefully somebody in the chat has seen Evil. But the first season of it is available on Netflix, and the second season is now, okay, I got one. Somebody loves Evil. The second season's now on Paramount Plus, and the setup, it's very much like X-Files for exorcists, where it's a priest in training, a kind of like computer tech nerd, and a clinical psychologist are all hired by the church to investigate religious phenomena. So things like demon possession and the saint's body isn't aging and things like that. And it's really cool. It's like somebody just wrote, it's like a more sinister take on Supernatural. So it's got a monster of the week feel, but it gets fucking dark, and I have just absolutely been loving it. And again, the first season's on Netflix, so I encourage everybody to watch it because it has just been a wonderful breath of kind of monster of the week television that I haven't had in a while.
Is it a procedural kind of like NCIS?
Not necessarily, kind of, but no, not at all. No, it feels much more like a little X-Files kind of Supernatural, and it doesn't take itself real seriously. Like the demons in it, I love the way that they're presented because they are scary as shit, but they're all really funny as well somehow. So yeah, it's great. So I highly recommend it. And I've been enjoying the new season of American Horror Story as well. which I'll say is a little weird because I fell off of it for a stretch, but I've kind of been in on this new season. Yeah.
I will recommend one movie that I didn't talk about on the other show. The new Bev is doing its spooky calendar coming up in October, and one of my favorite movies, Race with the Devil, is playing on a double feature with one that I'd seen the cover of my whole life but never watched, Brotherhood of Satan, because it looks like a movie that I already know what it is. Like if I see the cover, I'm like, oh, I know what that is, and I don't watch it. And then I watched it and it's like, holy fucking shit, this is one of the coolest movies I've seen this year. Nothing like what I thought it was going to be. It is like a family breaks down in the small town and can't leave. Everyone's hiding in the small town and they don't know why. And they find the cop, the main cop of the town, played by L.Q. Jones, and he's freaking out, and you don't know why. And Strother Martin plays a doctor in this film, and you start to realize that a lot of the children have been going missing in this town, and you can't leave this town. There's no way out of this town. If you try to drive to the edge, you're going to have a horrible accident. So everyone's stuck here, and there is a cult of people who are basically trying to re-inhabit the body of the children and take over to live forever. And it's so fucked up and weird. This movie, it was such a surprise because it's just, you look at the cover and you go, oh, okay, it's just going to be a cult Satan movie, but it's more like a twisted Twilight Zone episode. And it was a real discovery. I think it's going to be one of the best double features of the year at any theater, is Race with the Devil and Brotherhood of Satan, because Race with the Devil is already a full, exciting movie, but this movie was so fun. And
is that Brotherhood of Satan?
The Brotherhood of Satan. And it just, again, the title also doesn't seem, that does not sound like the movie I then watched.
I've literally had the DVD of it sitting on my shelf for years.
It's really cool.
Never felt the need to watch it.
Yeah, it's super weird.
Cool.
Strother Martin, for those I'm not sure, he is the man with the greatest line in what we have here is a failure to communicate. Like that is, and so him in a Satan movie, it's pretty amazing to watch what he gets. He gets to do some serious scene chewing. But L.Q. Jones also produced it and was a writer on it too. So you know, it's just, you know, I love those kind of movies. But this was one of those. I love being surprised by things that you have kind of written off. Yeah. Stupidly, ignorantly, like just because you've seen a cover or it's been around forever. It's a cool cover, don't get me wrong, but it just looks like a typical, you know, black magic ceremony kind of movie. But
yeah, but man, you want to talk about contemporary folk horror? Like Race with the Devil is a really good example of kind of folk horror being kind of mixed in with what we consider to be like a modern world.
Yeah, and satanic ritual and kind of mixture. Yeah, no, it's. I mean, you don't see too much of it. Yeah, and in RV, you don't see too much of like what their belief system, you know, of what these people. But it is, you don't need to. It's just to accept Oats and Fun and over Tango and Cash. I would agree.
I'll take
but Tango and Cash is also pretty awesome.
And Adam Lounsbury pointed out something that's really cool. So there is actually, and you can read about it. Elise Wax wrote an entire book on the Friday the 13th TV series. But there is an episode about a biker gang returning from the dead.
I love that show. I don't remember that one though.
It went on for way longer than I watched, and man, if you are into it, Elise Wax is the foremost expert on it, and just completely geeks out in her book and goes way deep cut with all of it, interviews with cast and crew and everything. But yeah, I have a feeling that one, it feels like Omania. Yeah.
Can I ask what you guys are looking forward to at Beyond Fest besides the obvious? I mean, I know that they're premiering Titan. And maybe a couple of other big ones, but it's always the stuff in the middle that I lose track of, that I feel like we really need the expert advice on.
Yeah.
From the main one for me, I'm just looking up the title because I butchered it a couple days ago. I love the filmmaker who Lucille Helenovec, I can't say, had Zilahovic. It's very hard for me to say. Who made Evolution and Innocence? I think Innocence is the most underrated like genre film of the last like 20 years. It's just utterly spellbinding and still no one talks about it.
And we loved Evolution.
And Evolution was really cool too.
Tight little aquatic horror.
She, again, this is what, you know, just like being called woman in horror, like Becca always has to hear, she's always being called Gaspar Noé's partner, because Gaspar Noé is obviously the bigger known filmmaker, but she also edited early films of his. Her new one, which I've heard nothing about, so it's just a total blind, is called Earwig and looks super interesting to me. So if I'm going to be out of town for most of Beyond Fest, which sucks, but if I could see anything, that would be the one I am most like curious about.
Yeah, I'm really bummed as well, Elric, and I had this realization that we are both going to be out of town for most of Beyond Fest. I leave on a flight at 4 a.m., literally like in like, oh God, like 7 hours. Like I said, I'm not sleeping tonight. But yeah, I leave on a flight at 4 a.m. for the East Coast, where I will be at the Project Right Screenwriters Convention doing keynote speeches, which is pretty cool. So I'm sadly going to miss Beyond Fest. But while I'm there at the Alamo Draft House in Winchester, Virginia, next Friday night, I'm hosting a screening of Night Beast, y'all. So join me for Night Beast if you happen to be near Shenandoah University, Winchester, Virginia area.
And that also, I mean, you were talking about Titan. That also won the Palme d'Or, didn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Don Dohler, that was a big deal when he won the Palme d'Or. I would give him a standing O for Night Beast. That one actor's giving him a standing O face in Night Beast, but that's about it. So yeah, I love Night Beast deeply. It's one of the best things Vinegar Syndrome will ever get to put out, and just because it's magic, but you know.
I think so, yeah. And plus, I'm glad I get to show it. I mean, Winchester is literally like 40 minutes from Baltimore. So
Yeah,
it's
right,
kind of, it's super close. So I'm kind of excited to show it there.
Have you guys heard of a movie called Mad God?
Yes, it's the by the effects wizard, right? Who did Star Wars and everything.
Is it?
Yeah, it's
Phil Tippett.
Yeah, Phil Tippett. It's an effects heavy thing he's been working on for years.
Oh, is that playing at Beyond Fest?
I think so. Yeah.
This looks insane.
Yeah.
So Phil Tippett did the effects for Starship Troopers, and he's won like Oscars and Emmys and stuff for visual.
He's been around forever.
Yeah, I've seen Mad God. It was in various stages of completion over the last 20 some years, and actually ACFA had been talking to him at one time about distribution of it, but that was quite some time ago. Yeah, I've seen it. It's gross. There's a lot of gross things in it. So if you like gross things, you should see this.
Well, I'm tempted now. That surprisingly was tantalizing. So thank you.
Yeah, there's no dialogue, and it is several different tableau of stop motion depictions of hell, basically.
Did we see this, Elric?
No, I haven't seen.
Is this the one? Remember, we walked in on that movie at.
No, that was French. That was a big. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, we walked into some crazy surreal thing at the Knoxville.
It was literally,
but it was recent. It was recent.
That was 2 years. It wasn't recent. That was 3 years ago.
Yes, that's recent. Pandemic recent.
I know.
Yeah.
I was thinking. I was like, it was one of the last festivals we were at, but no, that was like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is insane to think about. So yeah. Now we have to find that movie. I was intrigued what it was.
Yeah,
we never found out. We just walked in and we were like, what the fuck is this?
But it had interesting sex with neon and a cool synth score. So yeah.
Yeah, there were robots. Yeah, it was kind of wild. Yeah. What I'm actually kind of excited about after Fear Street, I'm glad to kind of see this resurgence of a slasher coming back. Like, because we were totally out of slashers for a long time, and I remember that we kept hearing that as like, everybody's looking for the next slasher, everybody's looking for people to reinvent the wheel. And I think that it took a couple of really kind of flashy ones. Like I think Happy Death Day probably kind of tipped it a little bit, doing something different, and then after that it opened the doors a little bit more, and then we get something like Fear Street. But these are both kind of more YA, but I'm super psyched for them. There's Someone in Your House. That book was awesome, and that comes out on Netflix October 5th, I believe.
Wait, what's it called?
There's Someone in Your House.
Oh yeah.
And so it was a book that I read maybe 2 years ago, and I am so excited to see the movie version of that. I'm also excited to see where they take the I Know What You Did Last Summer TV show. Like that's coming to Amazon in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited about that. And Mike Flanagan's Midnight Mass debuted today. So that's literally what I will be watching as soon as I finish this. Mike has been trying to do this literally when he made Absentia like 8 years ago. I was booked on a panel with him at StokerCon. And he told me about Midnight Mass then. He had this concept for this like crazy island. And I remember hearing about it, and it took him getting, a whole bunch of other shows to be able to do it. But he has said that this is like the best thing he's ever made. So
Becca just said this is his Malignant.
Liked
You
my
just said that word for word. You said he had to
I didn't
make $1
hear
billion
it.
for the industry, and then he got to make his Malignant.
Oh,
So,
and Nathan Simmons just said the film that we saw in Knoxville was called Blood Machines. That's it.
It doesn't sound. It doesn't. I think he's right, but it doesn't.
I think
sound
he's
like a movie
right.
that
It
should be called
doesn't
Blood
sound.
Machine.
No, we literally we had gotten candy and a whole bunch of popcorn, and we were like, we should just go walk in and see what's playing. And we caught like the last half an hour, and it was literally just the two of us leaning over, going, "What the fuck is this?" Like every couple of minutes, and it was wonderful.
The best kind of experiences. Hey,
yeah.
Jonathan Kreisky said brand new cherry flavor too. OMG, we agree, and they're on the creators of that show are on our next episode, so we're very excited
Colors of the Dark,
to dive into all the influences of that, because there's so many postmodern art and movie references and influences on that show that I think it's a fun one to kind of discuss because it's just all over the map.
I really, my big question for Nick Antosca this round is I want to know what his pitch process is, because he gets shit made that I don't know how it gets made. I always watch his stuff and go like, I don't know how they saw like a profit margins on this.
I know
like,
this one's a book.
The P&L department had to be like freaking out. So, because his stuff is always so offbeat, but it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's crazy. Only a streamer could make it, but.
Yeah, so you can, the two showrunners from Brand New Cherry Flavor will be on our show next week.
We got a question about the movie from Trevor. And let me see, maybe I can bring Trevor over. You can put in the chat if you don't want me to do this, but
that is a heavy question.
Where do you see that? I don't see a question.
Yeah, it's under the Q&As.
Maybe I'm in a different place.
Yeah, that's a big old heavy question.
The movie takes a rather glib attitude towards
it.
I don't see it, the question, but over here.
We'll let Trevor ask then. Trevor, are you with us?
Hi.
Hey, Trevor, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing well. Where are you in the world?
I'm in Coon Rapids, Minnesota, so just shy of Minneapolis. But yes, my question was about the depiction, or I guess the display of suicide in this film, and how you guys feel about it, because I feel like there is some message being sent about suicide from some perspective, but I also think it's very playful about the subject matter. So I was just curious as to how you guys interpret what the filmmaker is doing when talking about suicide, and if you think it's, you know, an exploitation of suicide, or if you think it's really trying to say something about the matter.
You know, I think it's a little bit of both, but I think it's very convoluted. Like, I don't think, you know, I would never say that this film should be our soul messaging soapbox film on how suicide should be handled cinematically. Because it does have both sides of it, where we see Abby, who is very much like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I love life. But then the majority of the gang is trying to find, you know, what's the most fun way to die? I'm going to jump out of a plane. I'm going to, you know, fall off a bridge. And it's very fun and playful the way that they present it.
But it's already off being suicide though, because they are not going to die, and so therefore it's not really suicide as they understand it, because they've got one person. Only the first guy is really leaping into the unknown. He comes back and then proves to the other. So all their playful deaths are like, they are playful because they're fun, because they get to do whatever they want, but they know they're not probably going to die. But I think what Becca's saying, I think the bigger lesson, if there is one, and I'm sure it's mostly exploitation, but is the character who decides to live. Because, and I always, you know, I bring this up to young people a lot when, you know, we both teach. And so you sometimes are talking to people about, you know, depression and, you know, when things have been pretty dark in this last year and a half. And I'll never forget watching that documentary, The Bridge, about the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge being, you know, one of the leading places in America where people would go to commit suicide, and it charted it. And I'll never forget that the 4 people who jumped who didn't die, there's only 4 who didn't, all 4 had the exact same, like to the T realization. The second their feet left, they wanted to live. The second. Didn't matter how depressed you were up until the point that the realization that I don't want. And so I think this movie, you know, only that one character of Abby really touches on the serious side of, like, you know, some people are willing to go up. And obviously it's much deeper subject that, you know, the reasons behind which are so personal, and, you know, we would never even bother wading into in this way. But I do think by having that character, they didn't have that character, I think it would be pure exploitation, and it would be a little silly. But with her, I think it all balances in an interesting way.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah, because I feel like it has that comfort of knowing you're going to come back.
Yeah.
And with what you're saying, Elric, it makes me think of Three Colors White, where the guy, I
Right.
guess not to spoil, but like the guy hires somebody to assassinate him, and then the guy does the whole he goes to shoot him, but it's a blank, and the guy's like, "Oh, I want to be alive." And I was kind of waiting for the scene in this film to happen where, and for some reason, the guy jumping from the bridge made me think, like, what if he lives and he's just paralyzed, or he's just, it's. I was waiting for that to happen, but it didn't come.
That was the eeriest one, though. His death is really eerie. The way he salutes and the way he falls is so well done. It's like one of the best filmed moments of it that feels real. Like it's a little unnerving, I think, that part.
Yes, no, I agree. When because I wasn't expecting it to be so have a sense of realism that it had, I guess. Because I was thinking, since it had that sense of realism, that maybe it would be like, here's where part of this lesson will come to fruition for these people who, are looking for an extended lifetime. But I found the depiction of suicide to be just interesting because it is kind of on that line of being taking suicide serious, but also sort of making it cartoony or like this kind of interesting way out, I guess. But
I will say that the line that irked me more than anything else in this movie is, why would a pretty girl like you want to commit suicide? It's what the first thing the doctor says to Abby when she wakes up. And I'm like, oh, it's only because she's pretty. Otherwise, so yeah. Thanks, 1970s male doctor.
I don't think you'd hear much different by a 2021 doctor, sadly.
Unfortunately.
It's true. Yeah. So, thank you so much, Trevor, for staying up late with us. That was a great question.
Thank you.
But what I find interesting is it doesn't seem to matter what state their body is in when they die.
No.
Because that's, I mean, it's that's one part of the mythology that apparently does not have any bearing on what happens next.
Yeah.
No, I want it to be where it's like preserved like that. Like that was in the movie, God, and I can't believe I'm going to reference this, but I actually like the story it's based on. Hellraiser Deader has a similar setup where it's they kill themselves and then they come back and can live forever. But whatever wounds they inflict stay with them and continue to continuously bleed and rot. And it gets grosser and grosser. It's very much like a death becomes her form of death. And I just referenced Hellraiser Deader with a perfectly straight face, y'all.
This is actually, I'm glad you did, because this leads into something that I wanted to ask that, and perhaps maybe this is a note that we can end the night on if you've got your 4 in the morning flight.
I do.
Female Pinhead? Is this happening?
Oh, I don't know.
Are you talking about that in the new movie?
Yeah.
Elric
I
and
100% know.
Yeah, Elric and I are really good friends.
100%
with one
no.
of the
You know for sure.
writers.
Oh, wow.
I know this part, but I can't remember what parts have been leaked because some stuff has already been leaked out there. So, but I don't know if that has either way. So
I was just looking something up on IMDb, and the only cast member associated with the new movie is a woman, and the character name is Pinhead.
So
then,
I will say,
you might know more than most of the world.
I will say that for a very long time, Elric and I have definitely talked about how the best villain in the entire Hellraiser universe was Julia, and she was great. heavily underused. And so seeing, kind of the female Cenobite, like all female Cenobites were always underused. It was always, you're the female Cenobite was literally what Barbie Wilde was called in the first few movies. And then even as you get into some of the future ones, like they bring them in things like the Wire twins, or voice and song, but they're always just kind of stuffed in the back. Like you go back there and show your boobs. And so, being able to kind of bring in a more feminist side of Hell, I think is going to be, I'm hoping they do.
Well, and I'm also, the fun part is like that people aren't talking enough about is like the dude directing a new Hellraiser movie has made 2 of the best films of the last like 5 or 6 years for horror films. So we've never really had that with this franchise. But beyond the first movie, we've never had someone who's like literally made The Ritual, which was a great movie, and then this year The Night House, which I think is the best horror film of the year so far. So going into that,
Tony Randall.
but Tony Randall's awesome, but he didn't have any track record. Like it's not like he made
But
Ticks
didn't
or
Scott
something.
Derrickson make one
He
of these
made
movies?
Ticks. Yeah, Scott.
He wasn't
did.
Scott
He made-
Derrickson back then. He
yeah,
was,
Scott
Okay.
Derrickson made, I think it was 7. He made the noir one, which is actually watchable. Like that's one of the
but this
better
is more
sequels.
like somebody who's at the top of their game. I mean, doesn't mean the movie will be good, but it's so rare to get someone at the top of the game right on the heels of a reinvention of a franchise or a sequel. Usually it's on the tail end of these things. So, and it's a big budget film. It's like not a small movie. It's like I think a $20-something million horror film. So I mean, all signs are that it's at least a real shot at it. So that's exciting to me.
Yeah.
Which one is deader? Is
I
that
think
like
it's
6,
6.
7, or 8?
I think it's
6.
6, 5 or 6.
Six.
Deader,
Or
and
is
that's-
space.
No, space is 4.
4. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. 4 is
Mhm.
space. So what is 5? It's not
Forgettable.
Deader. Forgettable.
5 is Inferno.
Inferno. No wait,
Okay.
4 is Inferno.
No, 4 is Bloodline.
Bloodline. That's the one that goes from the 1700s to space. And
Yeah.
then we get Inferno, which I legit. don't
4 was the last one released in theaters.
Oh.
4 has Adam Scott with the best hair of his life. I appreciate 4 because it's exploring kind of the Baroque version of Hellraiser, and then it goes to the 90s, and then it goes to space. But there's a moment of it where it's very much in this kind of gluttonous, like Baroque period.
That's the kindest thing anyone's ever said about that movie.
I know, right? But Deader, I appreciate because it was actually Weinstein bought it as not a Hellraiser script. And it's actually kind of a cool concept about this cult in Bucharest that discovers if they stab each other, that they'll come back and live forever. Like that's and it's got Carrie Wurr in it, who I love. That's a cool concept. And then they kind of wedge Pinhead in there that he's pissed off that people are coming back and escaping hell or whatnot.
But there's a lot of Hellraiser in this movie. I mean, that just to
Yeah.
tie it back, because it did seem like a tangent to go to Hellraiser. It's not really. I mean, this is about coming back. It's about pushing the body to the limit between, what is beyond. And those are the same questions that were in this movie. And if the mom and the butler were replaced with Julia and Frank, it would seem like it's that kind of world. So.
Oh, and thank you, Nathan. 5 is the Derrickson one. And so that would be the one that's a little bit more noir. It's definitely got a very unhinged protagonist throughout the whole thing. But it's a more watchable one of the sequels. And thus concludes the Hellraiser screening we did.
Somebody's mentioning the bikers from Mandy for sure. That's very Hellraiser, and that's very this too. Yeah, so that maybe that Mandy's the missing link between this and
Mandy,
Hellraiser.
yeah, is the missing link between bikersploitation and Hellraiser.
Triple
and
feature.
Thus, we have tied it all up. We go from Psychomania to Hellraiser
like
to
it.
Mandy, and somehow it all makes sense. So that's beautiful. Yeah, perfect wrap up. Thank you for that.
Cool.
Well, guys, I guess I should go pack or something. I hope to see if any of you guys can make it to Nightbreed, Alamo, Winchester, Virginia.
Night Beast.
Night Beast, sorry.
That's why she keeps me around.
We're talking
for
about
typos.
Hellraiser. So there we go. To Night Beast, which is a much different movie. Next Friday night.
So he would be cool in Nightbreed. Like I'd love to see the Night Beast just pop into.
He's part 5.
Oh yeah,
Aaron
Nightbreed.
Boone is Hellraiser 5. So.
I'd watch it. I'm
And
in.
thus we have come full circle.
Yes.
So.
Drag us off with a cane quickly.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Thanks,
And our next one of these will be live for Possession on October 25th at USC's Norris Theater. I need to update the website to sort of make it a Colors of the Dark event, but
Can it be a picture with my 2 toys?
yes.
Can we change out my 2 possession figures that
Elric has
Brett missed
4
it
different.
at the start?
You've got 4 different possession shirts. How are you even going to pick which one to wear?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll bring one to give away. That's it. Officially, I'm going to give some of my own clothes away at this screening.
Oh my God.
Hold me
It'll
to
be a
that.
bit like Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah.
I think you should wear all of them in
All of
layers.
them. Just take them off throughout the night. And
Why,
just have one-
Isabel? Why? Why did you use the meat cleaver? Anyway, that's a good mashup. I could see Tommy Wiseau being intercut with Isabel's freak out. I think you're onto something. I'm just not going to do the work for it though. So anyway, thanks for sticking around.
Thank you guys for sticking around. Please check out Colors of the Dark. We are on every other Wednesday on the Fangoria Podcast Network. As we mentioned, this next week, we have the showrunners from Brand New Cherry Flavor. And please also check out our Patreon show, Deep Cuts, which you can find on Patreon, which is all of the off weeks of Colors of the Dark. And that is where we get into the really weird shit. So, yeah. Thank you so much for having us again, Alex.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. And have a great flight, and I'll see you guys soon.
Yay! Thanks, guys.
Bye.